All right, hi everyone. My name is Jonathan, and I'm here to talk to you guys about Vagrant, Puppet, and Laravel. Who am I? Um, Again, I'm Jonathan, and I am a software developer at AI Squared. Um, if any of you guys don't know what that is, it's just we're a company that builds software for the visually impaired and blind people. I work with many technologies, but for the most part, it's PHP, Python, C, JavaScript, and it just goes on. Um, I'm Haitian, and as you guys can see, all I do is eat, code, and sleep. Um, so yeah, I really hate cats, and this is my website. Um, and so so let's get started. So what's the problem? Managing managing development environments is like it's really a pain, especially like when you have a bunch of different PHP versions. So like if you have PHP 5.3, 5.4, the incompatibilities and all that stuff. If you're trying to use, if let's say you have a couple applications that you're building and like one of them has to use 5.3, the other one you want to use 5.4, installing them on the same system, there are ways you could do that, but it gets really annoying and it becomes a real pain. And then you also have like the problem when you go through this all these all the hoops to like set up Apache and all this stuff on your computer, and then you go on and you do something in Apache and you just mess everything up, and then you're like, okay, so how do I fix that? And you also have like at times when you want to duplicate the environment. So like if you're working with a friend or something, or if you're in a team, you want to pass that on to one of the team members to have the same environment, and then later on be able to deploy it. It gets really complicated if you're just working like on MAMP or something, and then you try to push to like some other server that has different configurations and whatnot. It gets really annoying and whatnot. So that's the problem. And the simple solution is use virtualization and provisioning. Um, for those who don't know, here's like virtualization in plain English. It's basically running an operating system inside of another one, and provisioning, preparing the operating system based on what you need, the resources you need, and whatnot. Um, so for virtualization, you have like a bunch of different tools and like software you could use. Um, VirtualBox is one of them. VirtualBox is free. It's open source. VMware, there's like a suite of products that they make. All of them are, from what I know, commercial. But I just use VirtualBox, so everyone just uses VirtualBox. Um, and the other problem you have is managing virtual machines. Is yeah, what I said there. It makes babies cry. So we don't want to do that. And so like the way you solve that is use Vagrant. And there's a tool called Vue, and that's just so when I get more into Vagrant, I'll talk more about Vue. But I'm not gonna get too much in depth about it. But basically, the gist of it is Vagrant is like a tool for building and distributing development environments, and Vue is a tool for creating the boxes. So like if you when you're working with Vagrant, you're gonna create a bunch of like a bunch of virtual machines with operating systems and whatnot. And when you want to build those, you can do that directly with Vagrant, but Vue just makes it way easier. So Vagrant is quite easy to use. Um, I can use it, so I think everyone else can use it. It can get complicated, but that's really when you want it to get complicated, but it's really easy to use. So let's talk about the setup. It's fairly easy. You just install VirtualBox and then you install Vagrant. You just go to those URLs. And this is an example right here. Um, I just created a directory, test Vagrant, went right into it, and then just did Vagrant in it, and it created what's called a Vagrant file. And the Vagrant file is a Ruby configuration file for the current Vagrant project. And the most basic Vagrant file is what you see right there. Like it's basically saying create a box with using the base box. That's just the default in Vagrant. And the boxes. The boxes are just basically tar packages, but they're Vagrant specific. They're installed globally, so when you add a box, it's not added to the folder you're working on. It's added to, I think, it's like in your home folder .vagrant.d or something like that, and it's just added in a boxes folder in there. And basically, whenever you use the box, it just basically it's sort of like uses the box, but it doesn't anything you do once you use that box for your specific environment doesn't affect the box. That's sort of how it works. So like in this command right here, that's sort of how you use it. You do vagrant box add, and you pass it a name, and then you give it the location of the box. And so like right here, Vagrant actually accepts HTTP or file URLs, and so like you can actually just pass it a direct URL, which like in my downloads folder I have Ubuntu Precise Prango, whatever the name is. It's 12.04. So I have that, and I just basically said vagrant box add, and it added that. And so now I have that box added. I can even go ahead and delete it from my downloads folder if I want. It's added to my Vagrant install and whatnot. So the way you remove the Vagrant boxes is just the same. You just change add with remove, and of course you don't pass in a URL since you're removing it, but you just do Vagrant box remove and the name, whatever name you gave it, and yeah, that should work. So the way the boxes work is, back in the Vagrant file, you would go in, you change config.vm box from base to whatever you named your box, so it could use that specific box. So that's all being done in the Vagrant file. This is just a 3-line Vagrant file right there. And right there, just in just these couple of steps, you can actually just go Vagrant up in the command line, and you actually already have a virtual machine that's using Precise, Ubuntu Precise. And as you guys can see, I did that right there. So I did Vagrant up, and then Vagrant has a SSH command, so you just do Vagrant SSH, and it SSHs you right into the server. And so like I'm able to basically work right in the virtual machine without having to see like the whole I don't have to see the whole screen. Like VirtualBox would, like, you could basically actually open the same virtual machine in VirtualBox, but I don't have to see all that because all I really want as a developer is just SSH access. So I just SSH into it. And what Vagrant automatically does is it makes the /Vagrant folder, so the root /Vagrant directory is actually a shared folder with the actual directory that you created the Vagrant project in. So like any files you create within that directory is basically reflected right in the virtual machine. And like if you change something in the virtual machine, it gets reflected back to the directory, vice versa. Port forwarding. So when you create the virtual machine, you want to be able to actually use it. So like if you're creating a Laravel application, you install Apache, you install PHP, install all of that. Now, how do you access that application to like see the UI and whatnot? You could basically do that with Vagrant, and you just use the forward port method. And what I'm doing here is just forwarding port 80 to 8001. And if I go to my browser and I type localhost 8001, after I'm done with this, it will take me right to that specific environment. And yeah, once you're done with that, you just do Vagrant reload. So whenever the machine was you already did Vagrant up, you don't have to do that again. You just have to do reload, and it just reboots the machine. And as you guys can see, it did exactly what I told it to do right there. Packaging. So once you're done creating that Vagrant box, that's when you want to like pass it on to your team member and say, okay, like, hey, I created this environment, and I want to be able to work on this environment and know that you're working on the same environment as me. And you just basically package it using Vagrant package. You pass a output flag, and you give it a name. You actually have to pass the output flag, but it just creates a package.box, which looks ugly. So you just give it output, and then you give it a Vagrant file, And you don't have to pass this as well, but what this does is it basically allows it to build the same environment, that since you use the Vagrant file to actually tell it everything, how you want it to configure the virtual machine, if you don't pass that in, the virtual machine won't be configured the same way you had it. So you just pass that in, and it creates the box for you. And now like you guys can see here, I changed the directory back, and I created a directory called test vagrant packaging, went into it, and now I just did vagrant box add, gave it the name, and just called that same box I just created, and it just sort of acted like it was downloading something, but it just copied it, and then after that, that box is now available for that environment, and I can just do vagrant init with the box name, and do vagrant up, vagrant SSH, and I'm right into it right now. So I just created the virtual machine, packaged it, and that same virtual machine, that same environment, I could have basically just gave that to a team member and said, hey, here, you can use this, and we have the same environment. Other operations you could do with Vagrant is, of course, suspending the machine. For example, if, let's say you're working on something and you have to go do something else, you basically suspend it, so it saves the current state and it shuts it down, I guess. And then basically when you're done, when you're ready to start working again, you just do Vagrant resume, and it loads the machine back again, and brings you back to the same state you were in. Other operation as well is halting it, which is basically just shut down. It says it gracefully shuts it down. I don't really see that myself, but it's basically shut down. And you can basically, this is the great thing about it, is basically, like, you could create disposable environments like this. Like, I can just create this and then say vagrant destroy, and it just destroys everything, and I could just do vagrant up again, and I have everything back. And so, like, that's for the situation when you mess something up and you just like want to start from the beginning. Yeah, so now so now you have another problem. Preparing the virtual machines for development can sometimes get the kittens disappointed, and we do not want that. So the solution to that is using Puppet. And Puppet right there, I pulled this quote from, I think, their Git repository or whatnot. Basically, it's just an automated administrative engine for your Linux, Unix, and Windows. Basically, it just basically allows you to prepare the machine so the way Puppet works is you tell it, hey, I have this virtual machine, or I have this machine, and I want to have these resources. I want to make sure that they're on there, and they can be packages, files, and whatnot. And it just does all that. It automates that whole process for you. So for provisioning, you have there's a good amount of them out there. I've only actually used Puppet, but Chef is out there as well. It's really popular. Both of them are free and open source, and they also have commercial versions. Just choose one. They all, I guess, do the same things. They have Chef has this one feature that I really like that's called data bags, which allows you you to store. You can basically create an application, and all the credentials you wouldn't want people to see. You just basically, it has a fancy way of allowing you to just put that, you could just put that in a repository, and only you really know what the real credentials are and whatnot. So Chef is really good at that. So if you need something like that, it's really easy. You could do that with Puppet as well, but it's more complicated. So I guess it's just based on what you need and what you're trying to do. You should just choose one that works for you. I chose Puppet personally because I hate Ruby, and Puppet has a different syntax. It has curly braces. I like curly braces, and so I chose Puppet because of that. So at the surface, Puppet is really easy to use. It's really easy to set up. If you try to look at the source and everything, it gets complicated, and if you try to do more complicated things, it does get complicated, but at the surface, it's really, really easy to use. So setting it up is they have a whole installation guide and whatnot. So instead of me having to go through that, like the link is okay. So that went off the page, but um, basically it's at the end of that it's .html. So yeah, so basically you just go through that, and it has a section for Mac OS X, section for Linux, section for Windows, which is quite scary, and then um, it has a yeah. So just look at that if you want to install Puppet. Um, so some information about Puppet. When you're using Puppet, I think I actually already said this, but when you're using Puppet, instead of like saying, hey, here's this command I would like you to run, here's a script I would like you to run, instead you say like, here's this resource that I want to make sure is on the system when I load it. And so like these resources can be packages, files, users, and so much more. There's a whole article, a whole section about that in their documentation. And each of these resources can have their own set of providers and attributes. And basically, actually, I think I have this right in the next slide, but Puppet uses its own language, which I said, and it's system agnostic. So when you describe a whole like set of like stuff that you want to be installed on the machine, you can decide to, like, let's say you decide you were going to use CentOS, and then you decide, okay, I want Ubuntu now. It doesn't really matter. It's Puppet will just work with it, so it doesn't care about the system that you're installing it on. So using it is easy. You like right here, I'm just creating a index.html file, and the way it works is like you create what are called manifest, and the manifest is like the Puppet file itself. So it's a .pp extension, and you just by default when you use Vagrant, if you don't go and set things up yourself, it just looks for manifest/default.pp. So like right here, all I did was I just added provision, and then I passed the symbol Puppet, and it basically knows what to do because it just looks for manifest/default.pp. And so like right here, this is an example Puppet file right there. So I created a class which is just something to contain all the members, and so these are like resources. So like I say, hey, I want you to make a link from var www to Vagrant, which is to /Vagrant, which is actually that folder that was shared with my my project environment. And force true just basically means just force it to happen. I think you all know how force works. And notify. So like there's this whole idea of like notify and require, and all of that is just basically dependency management. So like basically how this whole thing is working is it's saying basically when notify when you create the link. Hold up, I want to make sure I'm saying this right. So it notifies the service Apache 2 that it's basically ready, I guess, and Apache 2 the service makes sure that it already has the package on Apache 2 present on the system, and then it ensures that it's running. So that's all. That's how it all is connected, and it just runs the command apt-get update to just update all the packages and whatnot. And also the way Puppet works is that it doesn't actually work by the order the stuff works. So like I could change all the orders of like how the resources are laid out. It's just really the way the whole dependency stuff works. That's how it just does everything. And so like right there, I just ran Vagrant up, and or like if you already had it running, you could just run Vagrant reload, and basically I just headed to my browser, did localhost 8001, and it showed me this. Actually, the reason I had to do this is because the image was so big. So like, yeah, the screenshot was too big, so I had to divide it up. But basically, yeah, it showed that same index.html file that I created. So like, I didn't have to like go and set up Apache, all of that stuff by hand. It just, all of that was automated once I just did Vagrant up. So like, how can you use this with Laravel really? So like, this whole thing is about Laravel. Well, how I use this with Laravel is I basically have like a set of boxes that I created, and I generally create my boxes because I don't trust other people's boxes. But like, um, I just created my boxes and I set up all the extensions I need. So like, you can say, hey, I need like Laravel 4 requires encrypt. So like, I can say, hey, I need encrypt. I need PHP 5.4. Um, as long as you get to anything higher than 5.7, and I mean 5.3.7, and I can say like install Apache, and basically like using the whole dependency management system, the whole like require and notify and whatnot. All of that could just be connected together, and like you have with just one command, you have like a whole PHP development environment set up, but it's also set up with the extensions that you need for Laravel and whatnot. So it's it's quite interesting. So I actually had like 12 slides or so that were showing the process of creating this for Laravel. But I actually found out that there's a guy who created a whole like set of manifests for Laravel, and like it works with another set that he created called Vagrant Lamp, which basically sets up Lamp for you. So instead of like having to go through all that, I think it's best to actually just look at what he's done. He basically went through the whole process and did everything, and yeah, so I generally don't have to go through all of that. But yeah, it's fairly easy. I hope I didn't go through this too fast, and I hope you guys understand it. But it's I think you guys can see like it's very important. It's actually very important to do something like that because it just allows you to automate the whole process and basically allow you to share it among your friends, whatever people you work with and whatnot. So, and it's not just like this is just the example for Laravel, but you can use this for I guess anything that you need. If you're a developer, I think you can use this for like whatever type of development you do. So yeah, and that was my talk. I hope I covered enough, I guess, but that was my talk, and thanks Taylor for creating Laravel. So
Anybody, any vagrant questions?
yeah.
So
Um,
one box per project, or how do you organize your boxes?
so I actually don't use Vagrant anymore. And no. I have a reason for that. Like I started every time I have an idea, I started like creating boxes for everything, and I never remembered that every time I create a box, it's taking space on my disk. So like I had so many boxes, and one day I just looked at the available free space I had, and it was just so low. So like I wanted a better method, and then I went to like this Red Hat event, and one of the Red Hat evangelists was telling me about Linux containers. I don't know if any of you guys know about Linux containers, but I've sort of been playing around with that. Basically, Linux containers are basically operating system level virtualization. So instead of like using the amount of space for every single box, you basically use the amount of space you need. The amount of space that the machine needs is the only amount of space that's used, and that's the only reason I don't use Vagrant anymore. But well, yeah, it's manageable if you're not just going on like me, like just creating a bunch of Vagrant boxes for everything. But if you start creating Vagrant boxes for everything, then it starts taking a lot of space on your disk. So, yeah. Yeah.
How to
Yeah.
automate the virtual host
There
setup?
is a way to do that with not like Vagrant is just a virtual machine. With Puppet, you can actually yeah, there's a way to do it. I wish I had a slide on that, but you basically it's the same it's the same sort of syntax. You just you create a resource. Um, yeah, it's speaking about it is I think it would be best to actually show some code, but there's no Wi-Fi or anything. But basically it's if you go through the documentation, it's fairly easy to go through it. They have like a learning guide, and it's like they provide a virtual machine that you can actually just install right into the VirtualBox, and then just like work with their guide and learn Puppet, and like through that guide you actually learn how to do the virtual host, and it's quite interesting. You just like it's like 5 lines of code, and you just map everything using that same syntax, and then you have like all the virtual machine created for you. I mean, all the virtual hosts created for you, and you can like set, I don't know, server admin, all of that same stuff you have in the virtual host config. You basically have that using the Puppet variables and whatnot. Yeah, what he said. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
How do you share the packages you make?
It's like I said earlier, it's basically a tar package. So it's just a Vagrant specific tar package. So you just basically, yeah, you could put that on a flash drive. You could send it whatever. You could put it on a server because like when you're adding it, you just need a URL, and it has to either be a file or an actual URL, HTTP URL. So
How
yeah,
big are the
it
Vagrant
depends on how
packages?
big you make it. It's it depends on how big you make it. Like all the packages you add. Um, so that well, there yeah, it's the whole operating system, but there are ways you could actually shrink them down. There's actually a site vagrantbox.es, and it's like it has a list of them, that you can basically just get the URL and just do vagrant box add, and you pass that URL in, and they're all different sizes. So like there are some on there that are like 200 megabytes. Um, the people manage to shrink them down that low. Yeah. Yeah, actually, Phil Sturgeon wrote in an article about that on NetTuts Plus. And he actually like they for Pyro, they actually have a GitHub repository with all the Puppet manifests and whatnot. So like you could take a look at that. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But I like keeping them running. But yeah, that's that's generally true. I guess. But like for me, I don't know. I actually had over 100 boxes. So like it got really big. So
Any other questions?
yeah.
One more.
So Puppet has this thing called client server mode, and basically you could um I haven't played with it enough to give too much information about it, but basically from what I understand, just from like the documentation is basically you have a server with all like the configurations and whatnot, and then like everything you want to provision, every machine you want to provision is like the client, and you just connect, and that's sort of the way it works. I don't know too much about it, but actually, one way I've done that is like Windows Azure. They have like a way you can actually you can just actually upload a VM image, and they have like a Azure command you can download. Like it's just Azure right on the command line. I forgot the exact syntax, the exact command signature, but basically you just use that, and you can actually just push not that exact box, but there's a way you can basically just turn that into the image and just push that to Windows Azure and use that on there. Yeah. That's like the question I've had for such a long time. 'Cause like I used Pagoda Box a lot, and like they basically sort of tell you what they have, like all the extensions they have and whatnot. So like I tried to replicate that, but it would be great if they actually like had, actually like basically told you, hey, like here's the whole manifest and whatnot. That would be great, but I haven't seen anything like that. Hmm. Yeah, see, it would be great if like a lot of other companies did that, but I haven't seen that too much. So really, I will look into that. I yeah.
Cool. All right. That was excellent.
Thank you.